To give you an idea of where we're going, I've brought slides of 5 items that we've collected. Oh, here we are. Over the past 3 years, I guess. This is a piece by Michael Nicol, Jagulanus, Bone Boxes, and this is one of 3 pieces that he did that we asked him to work on, which commented in some way or another about the process of renewal that the museum has gone through over the past 3 or 4 years. It's a contemporary piece. What really attracted me was the fact that Michael Nicol uses a manga style and with Haida content. So it starts to look at the relationship between the global and the local. I think this is very important, and the reason, and another reason we bought it was because the Great Hall we felt needed to have some contemporary pieces. We've got so many poles and so many masks, so many canoes, that we are looking to probably acquire 6 or 7 large major pieces to show the vitality of Northwest Coast art and culture. That's one area in which we're going. The second area is regarding the rest of the world, if you like, and one area is the African collection. The African collection is of the quality of the pieces is highly variable. Of course, we do have some old pieces. They all come from one particular collection of about 150 pieces, which the rest of the collection is more contemporary. What we decided on collecting to represent Africa are contemporary pieces. So there are some body maps which Carol Mayer has recently acquired, which actually haven't arrived yet, so I have no illustrations of those. But these pieces are from Guinea-Bissau. And Guinea-Bissau was a former Portuguese colony, and material from Guinea-Bissau is hardly represented in any museums in North America, and hardly any museums in Europe outside of Portugal. One genre of masks that they have are a series of dances, initiation dances, which take different sea animals, and these are from the Bijagos Islands. And the Bijagos is the only cultural group I know of in Africa that uses sea creatures in its mask dances. So this is one of a collection of about 9 pieces that we acquired. They were all made in the late 1980s, 1990s. I think there's one piece from about 2003. And they were collected by a long-time resident in the Bijagos. Another area is Latin America, and this is really a kind of a personal indulgence because my own area is Latin America. And the museum had a collection of about 1,000 Latin American pieces. And there were 2, in fact there are 3 kind of collections, 2 collections which we'd been asked if we were interested in them in the past, local collections, quite large collections. But at that time we had no storage space. And in fact, for the last 15 years or so, we've been turning down important collections of material because we had no space. Some of those collections went to Glenbow, but at least one collection of Chinese jades went to the University of Cambridge in England. So when I arrived, I tried to capture some of those collections, and being a Latin Americanist, I kind of focused on the Latin American collections. So this is a collection of masks of about roughly 200 masks that were put together by Alf Siemens, a professor of geography who worked over a protracted period of time in Mexico. These will be on exhibition. These masks here, they're from different communities, but basically they're from one particular dance. The red masks at the top represent different representations of Moors or Muslims. And the ones at the bottom are again from different communities and represent different depictions of Spaniards. And the dance which they're part of, the Dance of the Moors and Christians, is a kind of a combat play which pits Christianity against Islam as a form of kind of the true faith against paganism. And then when the Spanish came to the New World, this was a dance which they introduced into indigenous communities, not only actually not only in Mexico and in other parts of Latin America, but also in the Philippines. Which basically restaged this dance as a dance between the pagans and the Christians, in which context the First Nation peoples of the Americas took the role of the pagans. And of course they were always vanquished. Except the nice story about this dance is that there are 2 or 3 versions that have been documented in which the whole story has been turned upside down, and in fact Santiago, who comes in leading the Spanish, is killed by the indigenous people. He dies. He goes to heaven. God speaks to him and says he's been a terribly bad fellow, kind of backing the Spanish. And so why doesn't he go back down there and back the indigenous people, which he does, and then the indigenous people actually win the conflict over the Spanish. So there's a lot of interesting kind of stories you can tell. This is, in fact, this is Santiago, and it's from a shrine from Ecuador, which comes from the Moratorio collection, a collection of, I don't know how many pieces, but so far we've been given about 200 pieces from this collection. It's a collection of folk art from the Andes area, from Bolivia, Ecuador, Peru, and the collection was put together in the 50s, and 60s by and large. And as I say, this is a representation of Santiago. And this, unfortunately, this is Adam and Eve, but Adam's lost his fig leaf. In fact, when I was bringing them back in my case, I'm afraid the fig leaf broke off, and conservation being conservation, they wanted to wait to do a full analysis of it before they pinned it back on. So you get Adam in all his glory. But these are folk figures that have been made by an artisan from the north of Portugal, from Trás-os-Montes. He is a man without any education. He worked most of his life. He grew up on a farm in quite an isolated area. He worked in a warehouse for most of his life, and then through illness, when he was about 60 or 65, he retired back to the countryside, took up agriculture, and when he was 70 or early 70s, he stopped. He could no longer carry out work, and in fact, in his own words, he took to doing 2 things, which was distilling liquor for his own consumption, and sculpting folk figures, which there's only a couple of outlets in Portugal where these come from. They're mainly of saints. The reason we bought them is because we want to look at Europe and actually present a picture of Europe along with Africa and the other continents of the world, and also kind of look at beliefs which, masking traditions which are very common in certain parts of Europe, to kind of actually to suggest that there are similarities between these different places, between the way people think about the world, the way they make order, the way they understand their own lives. And this is an exhibition that we're planning, and we're hoping that this might travel to Toronto for the Portuguese community in Toronto, which is on 15 master folk artists. What we've chosen to do is find at least 6 which have never been displayed before. And the exhibition we're calling Heaven, Hell, and Somewhere in Between, because most of the figures are of angels and saints and Jesus and the Trinity, or else they're of devils or the 7 deadly sins. And then in between these, you have everyday crafts of shepherds and other rural crafts, utilitarian works too. But they're all incredibly dramatic. This is probably the least dramatic. Where that exhibition is planned for 2011. So it'll give you some idea in the different areas in which we're moving.